Hello, everyone. No one can really see this yet, but we have started streaming very unceremoniously. We are here for all of our 0 viewers as of yet, but people are going to slowly trickle in as we get started here. We'll just sit here and wait for a moment as people tune back in. I'm going to give a quick message to all of my usual viewers here on this Twitch channel. Today's stream is going to be nothing like anything that I normally do on this channel. And I am not going to be acknowledging any resubscribes or like we're not doing the typical Twitch thing here tonight. We're doing a talk for industry folks, specifically Texas voiceover performers is who we are speaking to. But kind of any VO performer who has questions about SAG-AFTRA in particular. And yeah, primarily people outside of Los Angeles. And probably mostly people outside of New York as well. There might be a little bit of stuff we touch on here tonight that pertains to New Yorkers, but it's definitely coming. Yeah. Oh, we don't have audio for Laura yet. Why not? What? You should. It says it's coming through. JK. What? No, it's no, you're definitely loud enough. Like it says it's going out. No, we really can't hear her. Is it? But it says that it's right there. It says it. Guys. Oh, why are those all unchecked? That's why. Fixed it. That'll fix it. Why would that have ever been a thing?
Did you fix it?
OBS. I should have, yeah.
So I'm here. You can hear me.
They should
Can you
be
hear
able
me,
to...
everybody?
Yes. Okay, good.
Okay,
They can hear
great.
you. Good.
Hi.
Great. All
Hi,
right.
guys.
So.
All right. So we got a few folks in here.
Good.
That's cool.
We're getting some people tuning in. And I see some names in the chat that I don't recognize as my normal viewers, which
is great.
Is good. That's good.
Perfect.
Great. So hi, everybody.
Thank you for taking time on your weekend.
Yes.
Go ahead.
We're gonna try and keep this as succinct as possible, but we're going to have a conversation tonight about the state of voiceover in Texas in particular. But just kind of going over some things that maybe you don't know or maybe you misunderstand about voiceover and how VO works within the union, within SAG-AFTRA.
And while we're saying this is about stuff going on in Texas, I think it's harder to say it that way because obviously neither one of us is there. Yes. So we can't fully express everything that's going on in Texas because we are not there. We don't often work in Texas. I work a little bit with Texas studios, but not to the extent that obviously somebody who would be local does.
Right.
So we are speaking to the Texas community from the perspective of folks who are in LA, but there is no possible way that we're going to sit there and tell you how your life is working. No. Because we don't know.
This is, and this is all information that is based on the survey that Laura tweeted out 2 weeks ago, something like that.
Yeah. So let's talk about how this whole conversation is like.
Let's do that.
Happening.
By the way, I'm Kyle McCarley. I'm a voiceover actor based in Los Angeles. You probably heard my name within the past month or two if you're a Texas voice actor, because I made a big public stink about Mob Psycho 100 and it not being on a union contract and Crunchyroll being unwilling to come to the table to talk about a potential union contract someday. And that maybe that's disconcerting to you. I don't know. Laura here.
Hi, I'm Laura Stahl. I am also a voice actor. I'm also based in Los Angeles. I have nothing to do with the Mob Psycho situation. Or really anything at the moment, other than I'm just also a voice actor. I happen to be working, or have been recently working with studios based in LA and also based in Texas. And so I've been able to chat with folks from both regions pretty frequently, and just kind of observing what's been going on. And the whole reason this conversation is happening is because I got a little grumpy. And I apologize. So, I saw everything that was going down, particularly the inciting incident, I would say would probably be the Mob Psycho situation, although there were other bits and moments and pieces that happened prior to that kind of led to everything. But I've noticed, especially ever since like the merger was being announced of Crunchy and Funimation, and even prior to that, Crunchy and Sony and all of that kind of conglomerate converging on each other, there's always been a little bit of talk surrounding that about what that would mean for the future of anime in particular. And I've paid attention because obviously I like to eat food and live in a place, and anime has been helping me do that. and and I care about my friends and the people whom I work with, and there was some concern going on, especially in LA when they heard about Crunchy and Funny. That was one thing that kind of bit me a little bit, was when I was seeing a lot of folks at that moment getting really nervous and scared about, oh, is all of the anime going to up and leave? Which, truth be told, a lot of it did, for reasons that are, beyond everybody's control. A lot of it did move, but there's still some here as well. But people were scared and they're like, oh, my life is going to be over. The truth of that is, no, it's not going to be over. Things are okay. I saw that happen. And then when people started talking about when the Mob Psycho conversation happened and other things started coming forward, and actors, especially in Los Angeles, began getting louder about the idea of Crunchyroll rolling over to being more union proactive. There was a lot of hesitancy from the side of Texas. And I think a lot of people in Los Angeles don't understand that, wouldn't understand that, because they're like, but the union is a good idea. And folks in Texas are like, prove it. And I get that. But I was just watching as there was a lot of like missed communications, or there was a lot of sort of uninformed takes coming out, and sort of not so compassionate takes coming out. I was getting a little perturbed seeing some of the language that was being used, particularly by some of the counterparts that I was seeing here in LA, kind of downplaying a lot of the worries and fears and notions that were coming from people in Texas, or from people just generally outside of Los Angeles, who had just started dipping their toes in the market because of remote recording, who may or may not know very much about what goes on with the union and what have you. I was seeing a lot of people, it felt like people were starting to be called, in not so many words, stupid, or trying to say that they were uninformed, or trying to say they were ignorant or selfish or paranoid. And I thought that was a bit, in some, I won't say everybody, but in some cases, a bit hypocritical. I thought it was, like I said, not very compassionate, not very open-minded, and not a great way to get someone to see your point of view, by telling them that they're, being a negative human, or that they're not very intelligent or something, that they, just because they don't understand something that they feel that they have not been informed about. And I got mad enough about it that I made a big old Twitter thread and I made a big stink about it because I was feeling for a lot of people that I was actively working with who were a little nervous or a little perturbed or feeling a bit unheard overall. You know what I mean? And it's to that end, I started speaking to it, and I made a whole stink, and I talked about SAG, and I was feeling a little bit perturbed. I felt like if if there are actors who are feeling that SAG itself wants that growth in the direction of like the Texas market, then it would make sense that SAG would be more proactive in the educating of those that they're trying to bring into the fold or convince. And Kyle saw some of that conversation about what I was saying about SAG, and he had a lot of opinion and he had a lot of information that I didn't have. And so he started talking to me on Twitter about it, and then I decided that the conversation was getting too long for just a Twitter thread, and I'd rather call him on the phone.
Right.
So I did, and you cleared up a lot of things. And I offered you, and I gave you some of the things, the anecdotal evidence that I had, and you spoke directly to it, which was very, very helpful. I can't give you necessarily every odd and end about that because I'd like to respect the privacy of those I've been speaking with. I hope you'll understand.
Mm-hmm.
But I've had a lot of, I had, as you remember, I had heard from a few different people who were expressing frustration, who felt that, who were speaking of SAG as an entity and saying that SAG was not doing enough or SAG had done too much or SAG when it was, and they were saying SAG, 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 and you kept on correcting me, like SAG-AFTRA.
Yes, that's that's something that I like to point out because that's I mean, number one, it's something that was brought up to me and fellow organizers in LA when we were getting to we started doing some basically W&Ws, wages and working conditions talks with the dubbing community or the union dubbing community anyway, when we were working on the 2022 promulgated dubbing agreement, and a lot of us were using SAG, the shorthand, as far as we saw it, and we were told, please don't do that because there were a lot of people who fought very hard to make that merger happen, and they get very upset when you leave out the other union that is part of the But it's also, I feel like it's also a big thing to think about now because SAG was a very different union when it was by itself compared to SAG-AFTRA now. Like,
and I can speak to that myself. It was very, very different. Because when I joined, it was just SAG.
Yeah.
And when I joined, I had a lot of really negative experiences.
Yeah.
That had to do with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, also, by the way, I am seeing some, which I'm really excited about. I'm seeing a lot of population of anonymous questions on our Texas VO survey. Folks who may not know, you'll see in the chat every once in a while, Kyle's bot will populate the link. We have a link for anonymous questions.
You can also type that little command that's up above our heads there to get that link. There you go, just like that.
There you go. So there it is. There's that link. So if you have a question and you're not feeling comfortable or safe enough to talk about anything, or if you don't want anybody to possibly know who you might be, and want to ask a question just to keep yourself safe, especially like with Crunchyroll and what have you, please feel free.
Yeah, this service is completely anonymous. No one will know who you are when you ask that question. But if
so please feel free.
We see it. We're seeing those questions come in. We'll get to answering.
Yeah, after we get through this like kind of entry diatribe here, where we want to absolutely tackle your questions. And also, I want to thank everybody here in the chat who did participate in the survey, and those who didn't. glad you're here. But I'm really thankful for
Yes.
everybody participating in the survey. I know that it takes a lot, even knowing that that's an anonymous again survey. I know that there was some hang up, there was some fear, some hesitation. That number one, even if you fill out the survey, it's going to fall on deaf ears because again, who are we? We're just people in LA. What do we know? And that number two, somehow someone somewhere may recognize your typing pattern or your way of using speech and maybe find out that you've asked a question and might put your work in jeopardy.
No.
Absolutely not. We're not trying to do that by any sense.
And we're not going to go over survey results here or anything like that.
We're not going to show them.
Yeah, that was something for us to be able to collect some information so that we could help inform the conversation that we're having tonight.
Yeah, so that we can at least drive this in a direction that's going to be productive and reach the points that you specifically would like to hit.
Yeah.
So thank you again for your help. That we cannot do this without you. It's the next best thing to, instead of having me in the chair, having somebody actively from Texas in the chair.
Right.
Which, by the way, again, I'm fully aware I'm not the best choice for this conversation. I would much prefer if somebody who is actively there in Texas, actively working in this industry right now, there, come forward. But at the same time, I would like everybody to feel safe.
Right.
And over here, I feel a little bit. I'm okay. I'll be all right. I'm out of line of fire at the most part, and I don't mind stepping in as a proxy at the moment. My hope is that someday we'll have either somebody, maybe we'll have a conversation specifically with somebody who works SAG or someone who works with SAG in Texas or someone from Texas. We'll find a nice way to be able to have an anonymous conversation, or if somebody's feeling comfortable enough who can just come and have a conversation like this, that would be fantastic. But for now, it's me. Sorry.
Well, thank you for doing this, Laura. Thank you for putting this together.
Oh yeah, it's I absolutely didn't mean to, and I have no authority whatsoever. But I got all uppity, so.
Well.
And
that's kind of how these things happen. Yeah. So, where were we? What were we talking about here?
We were mentioning how one of the a key point that I think I don't know if the full scope of this point, even though it's a very important one, will land. SAG and SAG-AFTRA are two very different entities now.
Yeah.
SAG is a thing that kind of no longer exists. That way that their modus operandi does not work at this day and age, and SAG-AFTRA is an actively evolving group right now that is actively trying to make things work for the better, not just for people in Los Angeles, and not just for people who work on camera, but actors in media today as it stands.
Yeah, SAG and AFTRA merged in 2012, I believe. Mm-hmm. And since that time, there has been a staff voiceover department created. So now there are like multiple people who work for SAG-AFTRA who their whole job is to work on voiceover stuff. Mm-hmm. That wasn't a thing prior to the merger.
Right.
So that's a massive step forward from where things were in the SAG of old. Which is part of why I kind of harp on that. No, it's not SAG, it's SAG-AFTRA. Right. Because it's different. And they've also gone to great lengths in recent years to organize in new spaces within voiceover, specifically audiobooks. When I was breaking into the industry, audiobooks were a largely non-union space. And right around the time that I started getting into that line of work, a very successful organizing campaign took place with SAG-AFTRA staff at the front going and doing grassroots organizing efforts, talking to narrators and getting them on board to help flip a bunch of different publishers onto union contracts, and now it's basically the inverse of where things were in 2011.
That's cool. Like,
And
I didn't know that.
just
But
as
that's awesome.
just as an example, and dubbing is another space where that's
actively working on it at this
yes,
moment.
yeah.
So, and that's part of why I think we felt a little bit, or some of us could have been feeling a little bit left by the wayside.
Right.
It's because, number one, we were for a long time. And number two,
those concerns are not unfounded.
Yeah. And number two, there are they've just created this, just a few years ago created this voiceover, conglomerate of SAG. Like, here's the voiceover chunk over here. There are so many different aspects of voiceover, as you well may know.
Right.
Like audiobook, like narration, like promos, like commercials, like animation, games, interactive, all of those things. They're trying to attack them, each and every one. And we're just one piece of that very tall pile.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, but it's actively being worked on as of right now. And since it's actively being worked on as of right now, it's definitely not perfect. But it's getting there. And what's going to help it get there is is being informative and helping and being active, so that you, the person who you're working in this industry. Oh God, there goes my light. The person who is working in the industry can go to the people who are working in the SAG building and say, this is the shit we need. And that's what Kyle is actively trying to do. That's why he's on the committee.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is that this was something that was made very eloquently stated by Keith Farley, who is a voiceover actor, director, who's on the video game committee. Was on the dubbing committee, is not anymore. But he was a big part of the organizing efforts that took place when the video game strike took place a few years ago.
Yeah, I remember that.
Keith got involved. He used to be one of the legions of SAG-AFTRA member actors who complained about SAG-AFTRA. That's not an uncommon thing. I was one of those people for a long time. But it became clear to Keith, and then later to me from talking to him, that the only way that things get better is by getting involved. So you can complain till you're blue in the face about the problems with, or the things that you don't like about the union, but the union is us. The union is its membership. So if you don't like it, you got to get involved.
Yeah.
Try and change it. So
that being said, we're not trying to mobilize you into some sort of grand army trying to become union.
Sorry.
Like, that's not the goal. Like, yeah, it's a beautiful idea from where we're standing, but speaking to just this situation right this second, say you're an actor in Texas and you work with Crunchyroll, say, and because we were looking at the survey, there's a lot of folks who work in Texas, and a lot of them are in the position of, they don't work necessarily in voiceover full time. There's a lot of folks who work part time, be it because they, aren't booking as many roles as they would like to, they're just getting started, or the work does not necessarily cover their cost of living and expenses.
Right.
Whatever. Say you're a human being just trying to get by. You're just trying to handle your life. Anime is a supplement of that life. And you don't necessarily are not looking at life like, oh, I totally have the money right now to just throw dues into this and become SAG, or may not even understand exactly everything that's going to entail. You're asking questions like, if I join SAG, is that going to knock me out of the running for all of this other non-union work? Does that mean I can't do it anymore? Does that mean, like, it can be a scary process. So the quick answer there, as a person who may be working part-time, you don't have to join. It is completely up to you. Even if Crunchyroll were to go union, You don't necessarily have to join specifically because of the beauty of Texas in itself being a right-to-work state.
Beauty
The
being a very
beauty,
interesting
right?
choice of a word.
Listen, we're just.
But no,
I'm
you do,
trying the
yeah.
silver lining.
As,
The
yes.
silver lining. As a right-to-work state, they do not, or even here, but right-to-work state, they can't start sending you letters saying you've got to join. What
No.
are you doing? We're going to get
No.
mad at you.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen. You can just continue to work even on a union contract as a non-union actor.
That is correct.
The deciding factor there is not the union saying, well, now that you're union, you better hire at least this many actors who are union, and you better hire them from LA. They don't give a shit. But all they're saying is that you better honor the contract and make sure that you're paying the actors the SAG wages. That's all they care about.
Very much the case.
That's all they want. So Crunchyroll or anywhere else, not just Crunchyroll, not just Funimation, anywhere else that may be working on a union contract, they or the clients and they have all of the say as to who they hire.
Right.
So if they love you and you've got a great relationship and they happen to be working on a union contract and they have you'd read for a role because they'd send out the role because Crunchyroll Funimation has the power to do so.
Yes.
And if you read for the role and they decide to book you, they have the power to book you. And if it's on a union contract, you can work that union job. And at the end of that job, you still don't have to join. You are safe.
Yes, because if you are based in a right-to-work state, the union cannot make you join at any point. Mm-hmm. Under normal union rules, there's a process that involves once you book your first job, then you have 30 days to work any number of union jobs, and after that point, it gets a little bit hazy on the rules. Yeah. But when
I joined, it was a terrifying shit show. You on the other hand, I'll give the very fast I was not working on voiceover. I was working on camera. It's called Taft-Hartley. I was non-union, working on a union job, and they gave me a union contract. And I was at that point where they're like, well, you better start joining. You better join. They sent me a lot of letters about it.
Yeah.
And I got nervous and I felt like I had to do it. So I, being a broke person, walked in and said, how do I do this when I have $12? And they said, well, they told me about a payment plan, which is still a thing that they have here now in general, but hopefully much better.
It's in the form of a loan now through the SAG-AFTRA credit union, or I think there's another credit union.
It was sort of the same. It was sort of like that. I had to put down $700 towards my dues. My dues at the time, several years ago, were $3,000. It's different in Texas, by the way. How much is it in Texas? You said like $1,600.
I think it's $1,600 the initiation fee is $1,600 plus whatever dues you owe on.
Right. So 60,000 years ago, when I joined SAG, it was $3,000. I put down $700, and they said I could pay monthly. And they gave me the receipt after I gave them that $700 and said that's going to be your SAG card until you're fully paid up. And I said, great. I booked another job. It was another union job. I started working on it, and then I got a phone call from SAG that week telling me that because I worked on this union job while I was paying off my card, that if I did not pay off the balance of what I owed by the end of the week, I would be fined, and so would the casting director. This was on a on-camera thing. Completely different now.
Yeah, and this was pre-merger also.
Yeah, so that is not a thing that you will have to face. That is not a thing that's coming for you.
No.
You're going to be fine.
Yeah, and again, if you are in a right-to-work state, you can keep working union jobs as long as you want. Oh, I'm mistaken. It's $1,150 to join in Dallas.
Also, my audio is crunchy.
Yeah, that's on your end.
Is it?
Yeah, you're just a little loud. You're just a little loud.
I'll turn it down. Is that a little bit better, friends? Could you understand anything I said?
We can, yeah, they can understand you. It's just, it's just a little bit hot.
When I'm being an
well, I dialed it down on my end and just let you keep talking.
Okay. This isn't my thing. Okay, cool.
Yeah, that's better.
There
Nice.
we go. Cool. Thank you. Sorry, guys. I know it's blasphemous. I'm terrible. But okay, so for long story short, for those who, again, brand new folks who are scared that they won't be able to work on SAG stuff, yes, you will. You'll be fine as long as Crunchyroll Funimation still wants to pull from their pool of actors. And
Right.
they very likely, even if they decided to flip union, would absolutely want to do that because they just invested a whole bunch of money into your brand new facility.
They have an infrastructure there in Dallas that they could not replicate anywhere else on the planet without blowing so much money that it just doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense.
They're established there. They're not going to leave.
Yeah, it's a very comfy
and they've got a
place
great
for them
talent pool there too.
Yeah,
They're going to keep using you guys.
100%.
That's not going to change.
Yeah, you guys rock. So why would they?
Right.
The biggest change and upheaval for possibly a blending or changing of the guard here would be the fact that remote recording is available. But again, Crunchy Funny seems very excited and set on being in-house. So still advantageous for people who are local.
Right.
Right.
And
so
this whole conversation about if the idea behind what I asked for with Mob Psycho 100, which was, can you guys come sit down at the table so we can talk about a possible Crunchyroll specific contract that could be used for future Crunchyroll productions. The idea there would be that then Crunchyroll would be producing all or at least some of their content on union contracts. That does not mean that they would be hiring LA actors or New York actors or just union members or anything like that. That just means that anybody that they do hire on the job gets those union benefits.
Exactly. So they at this to be frank, they have just as much possibility of hiring outside of the state after possibly flipping union as they do today.
Right.
They could do it any day.
Right.
And as of right now, we see what the trend already is, which is
they are definitely moving more to recording at that shiny new Dallas location.
On location. So if they haven't done this now, outside of their own internal decision that has nothing to do with the union to change up their standard operating procedures, they're going to continue in the direction in which that they've moved right now.
Right.
Which is you guys. Yeah.
So that was a big topic to talk about for sure.
That was a lot of folks that I was seeing.
Yeah, a lot of concerns about that. About if now there's also a lot of concerns about seeing the ask of trying to get them to meet as futile, and seeing that Crunchyroll seems so unwilling. Why try? And the why is because it benefits everybody. If they do come to the table and meet, then that means that everybody starts getting paid a minimum amount that's a little bit more fair, because there's still a tiered structure in place at Crunchyroll with the rates that they pay people. Some people,
there would also be possible protections in place for you,
and that's the other thing. That's the protections like vocal stress protections, which are huge. We just got that in the Netflix agreement. Now our vocally stressful sessions are limited to 2 hours. They cannot go any longer than that if we're going to be doing a lot of screaming and stuff.
Which preserves you. Or say their schedule suddenly flips around. I don't know how much of a trend this is over where you guys are, but say they put you on the books, they put you on hold for something to come in the next day, or you're going to come in the next day, and they suddenly cancel it within 24 hours.
Right.
your pay would be protected. You'd
Yes.
still be paid for that session.
By union rules, they have to give you more than 24 hours notice to scheduling changes. Otherwise, they still owe you payment for the session.
Money. So if you're being jerked around, say by your schedule, you're not sure whether or not you're going to go. If you're looking at 3 hours beforehand, and they say, actually, never mind, we'll call you later. You would still be paid for that time.
Right.
And a bunch of other things that you could go into if you were interested in possibly joining the union.
Right. One thing that people definitely see as a benefit for unionizing is the potential benefit for health and retirement contributions. That was something that on the survey, people resoundingly ranked that as the number one reason for going union, which I agree with personally. That's my number one thing too. That's a benefit that you get if you're working on a union contract. You get contributions towards health insurance, which, granted, you do have to earn a certain amount on union contracts every year, and I think it's $26,000 now is the threshold, which is, granted, that's a pretty substantial sum, especially when we're talking about dubbing session fees, which are not a lot. But
yeah, it's something. And then on top of that, if you were suddenly finding yourself in an advantageous spot where you're working on your dubbing shows and more of them seem to be union, and you did decide at one point or another to actually join the union, that would open up for you not just the ability to work on these dubbing shows, but other union stuff, and not just voiceover. Say you wanted to work on film and television. Say you were hoping to get closer into like AAA games and things like that. That opening of remote recording still remains open. There are still major shows, major productions that are casting a wider net beyond Los Angeles.
Yes.
And they are accepting a lot more from out of state. And I know a lot of actors just in general that have not just an LA agent, but agents all over the country.
Right.
And so you could start submitting for perhaps representation in other markets like Chicago, like Atlanta, like New York, like Los Angeles. And you would start submitting from where you are today all over the country, if you so chose, already part of the union. So it would be easier for them to hire you on those larger productions.
That does bring up another concern that was mentioned a lot in these survey responses, which is there's a perception, it seems, from a lot of the respondents who filled this out from Texas, that that Los Angeles as a market is far less open to hiring people from not LA than Texas seems to be to hiring people who aren't in Texas.
Right.
And something that I want to point out is that as actors, we don't have a lot of control over that. But I will also say that, I mean, pre-pandemic, remote recording in LA was basically unheard of.
Right.
And that is definitely not the case anymore.
Not even close, yeah.
There've been a lot of casts I've seen that I've been like, oh, that was produced at Bang Zoom or some other studio in Los Angeles, but half of that cast is people who are like scattered throughout the country.
Literally, I was just recently directing a production, a film, a union film, the dubbing, and my main cast was comprised of people. There were a couple people in LA, but there were also folks in Canada. I also had folks in Texas. I also had folks in New York. So that's
fantastic.
Now outside of the country.
Yeah.
So like, and
that's fantastic.
I've been having that has been a trend for me since I've started directing, which I began that within the pandemic. And I am just seeing more and more and more of that.
And that's not you doing casting.
No, I'm not casting.
To clarify that, because I know.
Yeah,
that's
So don't thank me
yeah.
for it. All I did was
Right.
tell people what to do and say good job. I didn't cast it. That
Yeah.
was the studio that handled that. And I have been seeing more and more within studios, union and non, working with people from wherever.
Mhm.
Um, and I mean, I can't speak to the whole trend because I don't have eyes on every single project. I just know for a fact that it is happening.
Yes.
It's actively happening. And I know there are even some folks that I'm not going to, again, name anybody at all outright, but there were some folks who started out in Texas and were actively starting to seek work here in LA, started booking it, got representation, and then decided to move.
Mhm.
But they were handling life and doing well in
Living
Texas,
in Texas and
living in
working
Texas,
for
and working
LA
a
production
lot
companies. Yeah.
for LA, yeah. So, while it may feel like it's a difficult nut to crack getting into LA, it is a thing that happens. It just may look a little bit impossible from where you're sitting because you just don't necessarily have the tools or wherewithal to go about it. You're not sure about it yet,
And it's
which I get it.
it is a wildly competitive market. Not to say that Texas isn't, but
Mm-mm.
if
Yeah.
you are submitting on something for an LA studio that is accepting remote submissions, now you're competing against everybody in Los Angeles and everybody else that is submitting
Yeah.
remotely. So it does
Right.
mean that there's going to be a lot of competition for those jobs, and
Mhm.
that's something to mention as well. I feel like there's also a perception that like, well, it's LA actors, we have access to all the jobs, not like, why do we need the dubbing jobs that are going to Texas? Because we have all the other work here. That's they're different worlds. All of those
Mhm.
different industries, AAA games, original animation, commercial, like all of those different niches are different worlds. And
Yeah.
because Los Angeles is the kind of market that it is, where there's a lot of different employers to work for,
Mhm.
when you get in with one, that doesn't mean anything for anybody
Nope.
else.
Nope, not at all. I mean, I've definitely seen it, especially speaking to, say, like, agents and casting directors or what have you. Having a long list of dubbing work on your resume and then going to a big major, agent and saying, "Hire me, I've got
Right.
experience," they will say, "Where?"
Right.
That
Yeah.
not everybody, but, like,
Yeah.
it's for
There's a
there's a
perception with
lot
a
of
lot of
stigma.
agencies. Yeah.
There can be
Because
a lot of stigma,
yeah,
yeah.
because the money isn't that great in dubbing,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
agents get paid a commission, and
And on top of that, to be frank, the dubbing industry as a whole hasn't been looked at as serious until maybe just
just within the past couple
recently.
of years, really.
Just most of the I remember, like, I only just started this job, what, like, 5 years ago, Kyle? 6? Like,
Yeah.
remember,
Yeah.
it was,
Somewhere
like,
around
about
there.
5 years ago, and even just then, I remember having conversations, taking classes and things like that. People are like, "Dubbing is a nothing work," they called it. They would disparage it a lot.
Yeah.
They were like, "Oh, so you just do anime? Have you ever done any real, voiceover?" And, like, and you're already saying, "Oh,
That
you're a
and that,
voice actor? You ever done any real acting?" And it's like, "Ugh,
but that perception is
now,
changing. Which, yeah,
actively right now."
yeah, yeah,
Which a lot of it is thanks to Texas performances that are going into the theater, releases
yeah.
of some of your Texas productions are changing that game because people are seeing it and reckoning with it for the art form that it is. So
Yes.
thanks to you, right? Um, that's just kind of how I feel about it. But anyway, so do you wanna jump into some of these questions? Because I see them kinda piling up, and I'm excited
They
about that.
are. I also wonder if I shouldn't. How about
Yeah,
why don't you look at those? I'm gonna go look at because we also got some good specific questions from surveys
in the survey?
that I want to
Okay.
go pull up as well.
So I'm
But
gonna
I want to be
start
careful
touching
with
on
those because I know people were a little bit
yeah.
concerned. Uh,
So I'm gonna,
So I'll heavily
especially
edit those.
in the survey, and when you get to the survey, go ahead and paraphrase a little, right?
Yes, yeah, I will definitely.
So
I will heavily edit those and just kind of like,
yeah,
just like
but
basically just
we're
read
gonna
them
hit
to
the gist.
myself and then be like, okay, so here's the gist, and I want to talk about this. But
Okay,
in the meantime, yeah, let's look
so
at some of those anonymous questions that are coming
yeah,
in.
so I'll jump into some of these anonymous ones. The first one I've got here is what's the average contract / pay like on a SAG-AFTRA union contract? And the answer to that is it varies, and it varies within the dubbing
Yeah,
world.
it varies even within dubbing.
Yeah.
So where to start? So this talk is mostly about dubbing. So let's focus
Right.
on that.
Yes.
With dubbing work in
Mhm.
specific, there are currently 3 potential union contracts in effect. The first one is the outdated 2001 promulgated dubbing agreement. That is only currently in effect with a handful of studios that exercise their right to negotiate, and negotiations are forthcoming very, very soon. But until that time, they are allowed to continue working on the 2001 dubbing agreement. Those
Mhm.
rates, and as far as I know, none of those studios are still paying the minimums from that
Mhm.
contract. But those rates were $64.25 per hour
Mhm.
with a 2-hour minimum for category 3, which was the everything else category.
Yeah.
I think it was the same rate for category 2 with a slight, which is television broadcasts, like cable television broadcasts. And that had a slight bump in it for multiple episodes being recorded in the same session, like $50 or something like that.
Mhm.
And then category 1 was, oh, what was that number on the old contract? Like $84.75 or something. That was for theatrical releases. That was basically it. So theatrical got a higher rate.
Mhm.
Plus, I think there was a buyout option in place there for that category, so that they wouldn't have to pay residuals. Category
Mhm.
2 had the same rate as category 3, but there was a little bit of a bump for additional episodes. There was a residual structure in place, but it was seldom triggered and never enforced, so you basically never saw anything. And then category 3, everything else, which meant streaming, because streaming wasn't a
Mhm.
thing in 2001, $64.25 an hour. Nobody's
Yeah.
paying those rates anymore,
Yeah.
even though there are still a couple studios that are using that contract.
Yeah.
They're paying a little bit, hopefully a lot higher, at least in some cases.
So, yeah. So, I mean, myself being less educated about this stuff, honestly, uh, I auditions and things that I've worked on that have come my way in terms of dubbing, I haven't really seen anything that goes below $87 an hour with a 2-hour minimum. And I would see things go up to and around 135 an hour with a 2-hour minimum. That's like after the buyout. So you
Yeah,
have a base rate, and then they have a 50% buyout on top, so they don't have to worry about
yeah.
residuals, which just rounds out to about
I think it's
135-ish.
133.50.
So,
I
yeah,
think is
per
where things
hour
are
for
at right
2-hour
now.
minimum.
That's on
So
the
it's a
Netflix contract, pays that
mhm,
much.
yeah.
And then the 2022 promulgated dubbing agreement has 2 tiers. $87 an hour is the
Mhm,
base, uh,
yeah.
plus 50% buyout, which gets you to 133.50 or somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And that applies to anything that's theatrical, anything that's primetime network television, which I don't think any dubbed content has ever fallen under that category,
Mhm.
and streaming platforms with 15 million subscribers or more.
Yeah. So it's about there.
Yeah.
So you're
87,
looking anywhere
133.
between 87 to 130, yeah,
Yeah.
133 something.
Yeah.
So it's about that. Let's see. All that's answered. I like some of we've actually answered some of these a little bit at just by talking, but we'll touch on them a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the best working conditions you've ever had in the VO industry, both in terms of fair pay and treatment and experience? I've been treated very, very well on certain projects, especially things that were very intense for me. Like vocal stress and that sort of thing on a union game contract. I remember, especially it was like just as people were peeking their heads out after the lockdown. They made, I had my parking spot, that was great. They had a bathroom set aside for me that was sanitized. They made sure that I had all the snacks and water and whatever. That's pretty usual. But also because of how vocally stressful it was, number one, they let me dictate whether or not how many breaks I wanted or needed to take. They let me go as slowly if as I needed to, if I needed to. They let me know that I had that freedom
Mm-hmm.
to take control of that working environment so that I could survive because it was very vocally stressful. I was able to handle it just fine and it was great. We'd take our frequent breaks if we needed to. They made sure that there was any tea or Nimjam, any like supplements that I might need, like honey or whatever, to make sure that everything was going on okay here. Um, and they were like, it's totally fine if we don't finish today. They let me know that we have time. I can come back. They'll schedule more if we need to. We're hoping to get done, but if we do not, there is no pressure and we'll be just fine. Like, it was very helpful. And they also let me know far in advance that it was going to be a stressful situation. They made sure to schedule me at the end of the week. Um, and they gave me the line count ahead of time to let me know what I was going to deal with. They just made sure that I was informed, felt safe, and felt healthy. So that was
Great.
one of the better experiences for me.
Yeah, that's great.
And for you, probably I'm gonna guess something somewhere around there,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I've had a lot of good ones.
Mm-hmm.
And it hasn't always been on union jobs that I've been
Sure.
treated really, really well, but
Mm-hmm.
definitely I would say trends toward union jobs tend to
Mm-hmm.
feel safer.
Yeah.
Uh, but
I'll say that
yeah,
sometimes they can be a little bit more of a stickler to make sure that that happens,
right.
so that you're
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
they'll be like, "All right, it's the top of
Yeah,
the hour.
yeah,
We are
not to
definitely
say
taking a
yeah,
break."
yeah,
Because
exactly. Yeah.
even if I would say, "I feel okay, we can keep going," they'd be like, "No, nope, it's time."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is
So,
really good, especially on some of those like the video game industry. Since the strike that happened a few years ago, SAG-AFTRA has done a lot to educate employers and actors both on the dangers of vocal stress and the damage that can be done there, which I think is really
mhm,
valuable because I think leaving it in the hands of the actors exclusively isn't enough because
mhm,
actors, like, we're conditioned to be like, oh yeah, I'll give you whatever you want. No, I'm okay.
right.
I can keep working. I can keep doing the thing.
Yeah, I would say that's one of the kind of sort of curses of this particular facet of acting. Although all of acting is a bug, it's a drug, it's horrendous.
Right.
But particularly within the anime world, because a lot of us start out as fans, uh, we number one, we feel very replaceable because we know that there's a bajillion other people behind us who would just love to have this job.
Right.
And then on top of us, we are one of those bajillion people behind other people who would love to have this job. And so it's easy to be like, to say before it's in front of you, oh no, I would totally like stand my ground and make sure I'm treated well. And then once you get into that position where you're finally on your dream job with your dream role, or you're just getting in front of this director you've always wanted to work with, and you're like, I want to impress them. I want them to love me. I want to be the easiest person to work with. I want them to bring me back. So all you're thinking is, if I tell them that I'm bleeding from the eyeballs now, they're going to fire me.
Yeah.
It's okay to let somebody know that something's
Yeah.
wrong,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
And but it's easy to feel like I can't voice any sort of opinion. I can't say that there's anything negative possibly going on for fear of loss of this job
Right.
or of this career, right? So I think that's a hurdle for a lot of us to get past.
Right. But
But
that's
okay,
yeah. So that's just something that I wanted to touch on that I feel like
yeah, for sure.
that's something that the union's done a lot of good work on in the past few years, which has
Mhm.
helped because now directors are on the other side of the glass are going, no, you're done for right now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which is a big step up from where things were even just, 10 years ago or however long ago that was.
5, even just
Even just
4
5,
years
yeah.
ago, honestly. Yeah, you know what I mean?
I have a question that I want to address from surveys. Somebody wanted to know specific numbers on health insurance stuff for SAG-AFTRA. And I can tell you that SAG-AFTRAplans.org has all the answers to all of your questions. But I believe that the earnings threshold that you have to have in a year in order to qualify for the health care is $26,000 on union contracts, meaning you need to work enough union jobs throughout the year to earn $26,000 from union work. There's an alternative earnings threshold that I think is now 103 calendar days worked throughout the year. That's an alternative that they put in place for background actors who don't get paid a whole lot, but they can still qualify for healthcare if they work enough days out of the year. And then the cost for the health insurance is very, very low. It's gosh, what do I pay these days for two of us? Like,
did you say SAG-AFTRA healthplans.org?
SAG-AFTRAplans.org. That has the information on both the health plan and both the SAG pension plan and the AFTRA retirement fund, which are still separate, unfortunately.
Okay.
But premiums for health insurance are currently $375 per quarter, not per month, per quarter. So every 3 months, you pay $375.
Okay.
If it's just you.
All right.
If it's you and one dependent, then it's $531. Just to go over some of those numbers for you.
Right. And I just put the
link in the chat.
Address in the chat right there. So if you would like it, it is right there for your perusal. Thank you so much. Somebody else asked what else changes about working union besides getting paid more. I think we're touching on a lot of that, like how we're treated in the session and those health and retirement plans. There's also other things that are, a little bit more mundane, like discounts at stores or things that are useful for actors in general. There's
educational resources,
resources, which I don't know about how that's gonna work with the new SAG location in Texas.
I don't know what kind of resources they'll have at the Dallas local.
But I think that would definitely be something worth checking out to find out. But
a lot of the resources that are specific to Los Angeles or specific to New York, especially because of the pandemic, are things that are accessible from your computer, so you don't have to be in that market to get to them.
So you'd be able, and I've definitely seen acting workshops, I've seen business workshops, I've seen pitching workshops for television shows and writing things. I've seen voiceover workshops. So it really kind of runs the gamut of the entertainment industry as a whole. So it's not even just acting or just on camera or what have you. It's being an entertainer as a whole that these things can touch on. And they can be really, really juicy resources. The classes are often taught by some really amazing people within the industry.
And it is almost I think it's exclusively it's all free. Like, these are all free resources for members.
Yeah, as long as you sign up. You really just sign up and show up for the most part. Yeah. So there's those things, and then
there's COVID-19 protections as well.
There's that as well. If you're, for those of us who are still, worried about the pandemic, and those of us who might be immunocompromised, having those protections in place can be a real lifesaver in a literal sense.
They are required to give you credit on the work that you do if it's on a union contract. Most of the time, that's in the credits roll at the end of the episode.
Mhm.
Sometimes there are exceptions to that, but they have to give you credit somewhere.
Somewhere. Okay. Yeah. So all of those things, and of course, there is more, but I think we've touched on a lot there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so a lot of these questions. Do you have any other questions
Oh
that
yeah,
you're
tons of them.
seeing?
Tons of them.
Okay. Why don't you give me one of yours?
There's a question about if the same kind of staunch advocacy for unionization with anime in Texas is going to be applied to non-union video games in Los Angeles, or just as an example. And I mean, I feel like there's a lot of lumping together that happens where LA actors view Texas actors as a conglomerate, like as as a one entity, and Texas actors view LA actors and union actors as kind of a conglomerate, and that we're not all of one mind. But I mean, as far as I go, I don't work non-union anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Period, across the board. So yes.
Mm-hmm.
As far as an organized effort goes, we're always having these talks behind the scenes where we're trying to. There are some, like, I'm not going to name these companies or these titles that are mentioned in this question, but
and I think a lot, but we all probably have a few in our brains at this moment.
The person who asked this question probably knows that I'm talking about these particular titles. And I talk about them with my fellow organizers all the time. We're always trying to strategize ways to try and get those things done. So yes is the answer to that question.
Yeah. And I will speak as a person who is union and does do non-union work. So this very well can reflect badly on me for a lot of people. I saw a couple folks in the survey who might look at me and kind of be a little mad at me, but that's okay. But I just want to come here from another perspective.
Yeah.
I do still do non-union work. I do still non-union anime, in fact. And that is simply because I, at this moment, still need it to get by. It's still a really big part of my income. And would I like to make a move to doing exclusively union work? Yeah, perhaps in the future that would be very, very nice. At the moment, that's not necessarily in the cards right now. And then there's also the thought about people talk about FI-Core. Perhaps you should just go FI-Core. I haven't found a need to yet as of right now. And also, I don't know the state of things right now in regards to FI-Core. I know that several years ago, going FI-Core, which is financial core, was deeply looked down upon within the acting community. I think unfairly, in my opinion.
My understanding is that there is still a stigma against it in the on-camera world.
Yeah, probably.
Within the voiceover world, that stigma, it might
a little muddier.
It might be there for a couple people, but I mean, and the other thing is nobody knows anybody's whether they're FI-Core or not.
You don't have to have like a stamp anywhere that says you are FI-Core.
No.
And
if an employer calls to check your eligibility with the union, all they get is a yes or no answer. Are you eligible to work or are you not? So, and that the union cannot disclose to anybody that you're FI-Core rather than being a member. So that's just something to keep in mind.
And then on top of that, there's conversation at this moment to change or get rid of Rule 1, correct? Which Rule 1 is not working off card.
That rule is, at this moment, that rule is still hard, fast, definitely staying. There was an effort that Bob Bergen tried to organize for a little while, and he couldn't get the support that he needed. And
okay, good to know. But in the meantime, and I mean, obviously, this isn't necessarily something that you want to advertise. I shouldn't be advertising it, but I'm putting it on the internet because I care about you. So I do work off card. primarily for dubbing. And to be honest, because I've been doing this for such a long while, SAG has never taken issue with it. And I do believe that the reason for that is because dubbing as a whole does not make you enough money for SAG to care. They just don't care. They may catch after this, they may catch my ass. But they have not I've not had an issue with it. I have not had an issue working union jobs, being booked for union jobs. I am actively represented at the moment with an agent. Um, they are completely aware of what work I do and what work I don't do. And we've had no issues up until that point.
I
Uh,
there are things that I would
mhm,
say in a private one-on-one conversation that I don't
sure.
know that I can say in a public setting like this.
Mhm,
But I won't say that SAG-AFTRA doesn't care, but I will say
mhm,
that there's the SAG-AFTRA of today compared to the SAG of yesterday.
mhm,
Uh, with regards to Global Rule 1, I believe that there is an understanding that punitive measures taken against the membership don't work in spaces where there's not a high union density. And
right.
dubbing is not a space where there's a high union density. It's a much higher union density than it was
Sure.
4 or 5 years ago, but
Mhm,
it's still not a very high union density. So punitive measures don't serve the cause.
mhm. So so there is that. But in general, if you're looking at the idea of SAG, if you're looking at the idea of joining and you're worried that it's gonna lock you into something, the chances are it will not. And then also on top of that, again, right to work state, you
You
don't need
never have
to
to
worry
join.
about it unless you choose to.
Yeah.
Unless you choose
Yeah.
to, and that's it. I saw somebody asking, does SAG offer healthcare and other insurances? The answer is yes.
Yes.
Um, we went over that a little bit.
Health
Someone
insurance and
was
also retirement funds, pension
retirement.
plan, and I learned the other day the pension plan also has disability coverage.
Excellent. That's
So
cool.
yeah,
Neat.
uh,
Yeah, go ahead.
I have one. Does SAG-AFTRA genuinely want to work with Crunchyroll as it is right now, simuldubs and everything? SAG-AFTRA wants to work with Crunchyroll in whatever capacity Crunchyroll would be willing to work with SAG-AFTRA.
Hmm.
We want to talk about the possibilities. Yes, simuldubs and everything. Like we want to figure out is there common ground to be had here.
Yeah.
Just
So the
gotta get them to
yes,
sit
the
down and have a
answer,
meeting. So yes,
yeah. So it's just a desire for communication in general, just to see if there's something to do, right? Something that can be workable to keep everybody happy, protected, and safe, and able to eat food and live in places.
mm-hmm.
Um, this is another one. Do autograph funds pay more than standard contracts, union or not? How much would conventions take from your share? Much love. I appreciate that. So autograph is it's sort of a wild, wild west. Autographs and conventions are an actor's own
Yeah, that is
responsibility
all
to handle,
outside of the jurisdiction of
completely
SAG-AFTRA.
outside their jurisdiction. It has everything to do with the individual actor, how does how much they're desired by the fandom. It's very, very fluid. For some actors that I know, they do incredibly well at conventions, and it is a huge part of their income, yearly income. For other actors I know, it is a big investment and may or may not necessarily cover itself as an expense. So, and especially if you're just starting out, if unless you have the big character of the moment, um, most likely you'll start slow as a trickle, and then depending on the direction that your career goes, that's how it grows. But a lot of people I know, especially some of the newer dubbing actors that I know, look at the idea of doing conventions as a possible supplement to your income. Just know that it is initially number one difficult. It's a nut to crack because it's from my understanding, it's much less you knocking on doors of conventions and saying, "Can I come and get a table and be be a guest?" And much more conventions coming to you. They
Right.
come find you,
Yeah.
right? Number one, and number two, it's again an investment. You know, if you're going to sign prints, if you figure out what that's going to look like, are you going to commission artists? Are you going to do headshots with cosplay, because a lot of that can kind of be a tug of war with the idea of the rights of the OP, the people who own the property that you work on. I know that there are some very specific properties that would not be pleased to know that you have prints for sale of their characters, so you have to be careful. It's a little bit more complicated and a much larger investment of time and money than I think a lot of people who are just starting are fully aware of. So take that into consideration. Um, it can be great, but again, it is completely circumstantial. Uh,
Something else that was brought up a few different places throughout the survey, but specifically in this question that reminded me of it. I'm trying to think of how I can address this.
mhm.
Let's see. So, I right. So the fact that this stream is being handled by two LA-based actors, and there's nobody representing the Texas perspective here, is that's unfortunate.
Agreed.
I would love to have a conversation with a Texas actor in a setting like this. I mean, I'm happy to have private conversations with anybody who wants to reach out and talk. Please hit me up on the Twitters or wherever's.
Hmm.
But it was we tried. We tried to get somebody to sit where Laura
Yeah.
is sitting right now, and
I
it
actively was reaching out, like, is anybody ready for a conversation? Does anybody? And the response became, we need to be very protective of the things that we say and how, you
right.
know, whether or not we're seen saying them. And
There's a lot of there's a lot of I mean, some people are comfortable,
mhm,
voicing their opinions about Crunchyroll in public settings. Some
mhm,
people are not comfortable doing that, but are comfortable raising them with Crunchyroll privately. But there
mhm,
are a lot of people who are not comfortable rocking the
mhm.
boat
And
because,
then there are
yeah.
also some folks who are comfortable having a conversation about Crunchyroll, but they're also very comfortable with the way things are for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
they don't feel they don't feel it necessary to have the
Yeah.
conversation,
Yeah.
which, you know, that's absolutely up to them. You know,
Right.
it's up to everybody's individual choice.
We
Not trying to sit here and change, you
those
know.
of us who are advocating for uh, a union contract for
Mhm,
Crunchyroll is where we see room for improvement for you guys. I mean,
mhm,
for everybody who works for them, but I mean, for and for some of us that includes LA actors. For me, I haven't worked for Crunchyroll in a while, but and if they never work with me again, I don't necessarily care, but I would like to see them work on union contracts for the people who do work for them, because I think
mhm,
everybody would benefit from it. Uh, I know that where rates are at for a lot of people working for Crunchyroll right now, those rates aren't as high as the rates that we get on our union contracts. And I would like to see that happen. I would like to see Texas actors qualifying for health care.
I will also very carefully note I am currently working for
Mm-hmm.
Crunchyroll,
Mm-hmm.
and I will carefully note that I have, and the show has a different rate than those that I hear about coming out of Texas. it's still a Crunchyroll show.
Yeah.
It is still non-union.
There's a tiered structure in place there, from what I'm told.
Yeah.
And
so I think a lot of some of the choices that we speak about when we're talking about being union versus being non-union, I think a lot of that culture is also very individual to each particular studio.
Yeah.
And each studio, of course, is acting out of whatever they feel is going to be best for the culture of their studio and their productions, right? So I'm not going to begin to say yay or nay against anybody or anything at all. But I will say that uh, Crunchyroll as a company as a client has definitely paid several different scales, or really uh, the allocation of funds for a particular project has been handled differently depending on which studio it is taking place in. Um, Also, there was one other thing I wanted to touch on. I've heard a few people talking about how they were reticent about things flipping to union because there was a possibility they felt that if something were union, then then that production would only be able to pay just the union rate and nothing above that.
that
And that is not true.
no, you can
Um,
always ask for above scale.
there are lots of productions that do so. That's the reason that movie stars exist.
Yes.
Uh, so
Yes.
it, the union scale is the ground floor.
That's the minimum. Yeah.
That is the minimum you can pay.
Right.
But and if you would like to pay an actor more, so like say any sort of production that has stunt casting where you've got a bunch of core actors and then you've got a few celebrities poked in here and there, those celebrities are not working for scale.
Not
They are
usually, no.
definitely being paid something a bit more substantial to get them on those projects. And that money is allocated to make sure that those celebrities can be there. So, there is no danger of not being able to pay an actor what they are worth
Right.
at the union level. They will pay at least that minimum, if not more,
Right.
always.
Yeah.
As long as things are being handled correctly
Yeah.
by the union.
Yes. Always. Always, always, always. Always
Yeah.
possible to get paid above the minimum. Uh Boy, somebody filled out this survey with a lot of extra questions at the end. I need to go through them all to see if there's anything we haven't already addressed. Let's see.
I have you keep looking there. I see if this require somebody's apologizing for the possibility of this needing to be speculation. What are the reasons Crunchy or Funimation or whomever would not want to go union? Is it just a money thing? A lot of stuff really does kind of trickle down to the base level of money. But not just necessarily the cost of just one production, because there's a lot that goes into it, outside of just like making sure that they've got enough insurance that because when you're union, you have to have insurance in place on top of that to make sure that the production is covered. At least I'm not sure if this is necessarily true for voiceover. I'm assuming
I
it would be,
don't.
but it would be on camera.
Yeah, I don't know.
Um,
I don't know that there are a lot of extra hoops to jump through there or not. There might be.
I remember
There might
hearing
be a
about
few.
a few productions out or a few production houses out here in LA that were having a little bit of reticence prior to doing more union projects. And one of those interesting contentions was the paperwork. There's more paperwork to do
There
on
is.
union dubs than there are on non-union dubs. They have
Yeah.
to fill out a lot more. And that, while that sounds kind of maybe a little silly, it's a bit understandable because keeping track of all that paperwork can be um, a hassle, and making sure it's all filled out, it takes more time. That means that your production assistants and people who are working within your office in an administrative role may have to allocate their attention to just data entry far more than they would much rather have them
Right.
maybe
Yeah.
looking at scheduling and making sure that things are running smoothly. And this can be a holdup.
And you can hire they production can hire accountants or signatory services that can help with all of that stuff, but that is an additional expense for sure.
That is all extra
Yeah.
overhead. So, and I obviously, again, you're right, this is a bit of speculation. I cannot begin to understand or
Yeah.
get into the heads of the people who may or may not, who are not interested in having a conversation about union.
Yeah.
I'm
and I actively had a conversation where I said, "Hey, can we have a meeting?" And all they said was no. They didn't tell me why.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
There's very little that we can say here with any certainty outside of they definitely have reticence, and I'm certain that they have reasons. And a good assumption is going to be money, but a better thing to keep in mind is that it's going to also be more than that, because there's no way for us to fully comprehend what's going on in that office.
Right.
Or any office, unless we're there.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay, this is a good question that's included in the mix of all of this stuff. If you essentially what it boils down to, if you don't join the union, like say you live in a right to work state like Texas and you're working on union jobs, but you don't see the need to join. If you don't join the union, are you still eligible for any of the union benefits? And the answer to that question is yes. You are still eligible for health insurance. You are still eligible for the pension plan or the retirement fund, depending on that's a whole can of worms. But yes, you are still eligible for some benefits, not all of them. The educational resources we were talking about from the SAG-AFTRA Foundation, those types of things are exclusive to members. The deals and discounts and stuff like that, but the big ones that people really care about, I mean, you're going to benefit from the higher wages and the collective bargaining. You're going to benefit from the protections that are in place.
Measures,
on the contract. And yes, you are still eligible for health and retirement benefits. You still have to hit the qualification thresholds and everything, but you're still eligible for that. I know that for a fact because I was not a member of the union when I started on my health care from audiobook work.
Right. I remember that.
Yeah. So.
Do companies purposefully pay less for voiceover work and only care about money? Could not tell you. Listen. Listen, I understand that feeling. It's a great question. I mean, it's kind of pertaining to a conversation I had with a colleague today, where they had a very strong opinion that a lot of what got us into our current climate, especially within dubbing, is that studios, and not just in LA, but studios have been trying to undercut each other in order to get titles. So, and what I mean by that is when a client exists and says, "I have an anime I'd like to get localized. Who wants to do it?" They say, "We can do your whole season for this amount of money." And this is super simplified. And this production company over here says, "We can do that same thing for 15 grand less." And this one does, "Well, we can do that for 2 grand below those dudes." And their hope is that client will go to whomever says that they can do it for the least amount. And then when that happens, they have that small amount that they receive from the client, and they have to take those funds and allocate them in a way that everybody technically gets paid and they make a profit. And a lot of where when they offer that very deflated amount to the client and then they receive it to work, a lot of where they start cutting those corners happens within the production side. So production has to take fewer days. People have to, especially on the production side, have to receive less pay. Writing has to take less time. And mixing has to take less time. I've heard recently from this is hearsay, but I've heard from folks that timelines for mixing a full episode of anime has truncated to a very minuscule degree, just teeny tiny window of time,
Yeah.
which has changed kind of the way that anime has been sounding. I'm not sure if you've noticed it, if you've been watching anything recently. But that's been the issue, is that in order to get that piece of work, to get that property from the original client, all of these studio houses, all these production heads have been saying, well, I can do it for less, I can do it for less, I can do it for less, I can do
Yeah,
it
it
for
becomes
less.
a race to the bottom. Yeah.
Yeah, and then they've got this shoestring, and a lot of that money ends up coming out of basically your pocket
Right.
rather than the production
Yeah,
houses.
that tends to be how that happens. Yeah, for sure.
So sort of yes, sort of that's how it's going. They care mostly for money. I'm gonna say that definitely not every production house feels that way. Or even studio houses that you look at and you believe feel that way don't necessarily feel that way. It's just them trying to uh, compete
Mhm.
in this market that I've just described. They'd
Right.
say, well, I'd like to pay more. I'd like to do better. However, in order to even get shows to work on, I have to offer them this tiny amount of money and somehow make it stretch and make sure everybody at the end of the day can eat and that we can keep our doors open.
Right.
And it's becoming harder and harder for productions to just operate, and then harder and harder for those of us who are outside of that scope, who are just coming in for the day to play our character or what have you, to fully comprehend what's going on.
Yeah.
So that is that has been, I think, a pretty big contributor
Mhm.
to this really fun market that we're living in.
Uh, I found another question in here that I can't believe I had forgotten about because I really did want to touch on this one.
Then do so.
So this somebody wanted to ask me to explain myself with regards to Psyche K on Netflix. And before I get to that specifically, I want to talk about a much more general difference between the Texas market or the Dallas market and the LA market, because
Mhm.
Dallas is largely a one-shop town. Like most of the work, the vast majority of the work that is available to voiceover performers in Texas comes from Crunchyroll. And there are things about the way that Crunchyroll handles casting that I actually think that LA could stand to learn a thing or two. I really do believe that. But LA is a much different market because there are a lot of different employers that are around, and even for a client like Netflix, Netflix works with like 10 or more different studios for all of their content. They don't produce anything in-house. They hire different studios for different projects, and they say, "You're producing this job." And
Mhm.
and I can't speak with a whole lot of authority on this because I haven't really touched that side of things in this industry all that much. But my understanding is that when it comes to anime in particular, their live action dubs they're a little bit more hands-on with. But their anime in particular, Netflix is often kind of hands-off with how things are produced. Uh, and they leave a lot of decisions in the hands of the studio. Some studios have a casting director who sends out auditions and then fields everything that goes through their studio and does things that way. Some studios do things a little closer to the Crunchyroll style of things, where the directors are a little bit more in control of things. Um, but there's one studio in particular that Netflix works with a lot, who shall remain nameless, but one studio in particular that is very, very careful about their non-disclosures. And they're not unjustified with that concern because Netflix is a major employer for them. And if Netflix feels like secrets are being divulged that shouldn't be, they can take away their work.
Yeah.
But this studio in particular, oftentimes, if they send out auditions, they will change all of the names. All the character names will be different. Anything that's identifying about the project will be completely different. Oftentimes, they don't send out auditions at all, and they cast off of some other sample that they've got on hand. So it's not at all uncommon for you to get a booking email that says you've been booked in XY codename project.
Yep.
And no other information whatsoever. Just a code
I've also
name.
received auditions with sides that have pictures of characters that already exist, like several of them, almost like a collage of a feel of the type of character.
Yeah, from some other property entirely. Yeah. From several different other properties.
Yeah. Because they're absolutely keeping everything under wraps,
right.
and that absolutely
they're very tight-lipped about things, and that's something that I wish that we could take a page out of Crunchyroll's book and get these LA studios to stop being so careful about the secrets.
Yeah.
That's something that SAG-AFTRA can help with, by the way, is the transparency thing. It's something that we've obviously got room for improvement on, but it's something that hopefully we can get in these forthcoming negotiations. But anyway, so there's that. I mean, this studio also takes away actors' cell phones when we walk into the studio. We may not learn anything about what we're working on until we walk into the booth, and we no longer even have our phone available to us to look up anything.
Or contact your agent if you're nervous.
Yeah, contact anybody, anything like that. So I just want to give that little bit of context that there's situations at play in LA that are very unfortunate, and I'm hoping that we can do things to improve that. But there is stuff that comes up that is tricky. One that I can talk about, and I swear I'm getting to the Psyche K thing, I promise. But there's a show that I can talk about that happened not that long ago, Spriggan. I ended up playing the title or the lead role in that show on Netflix, and didn't find out until 3 or 4 sessions in to just a 6-episode miniseries. Didn't find out till 3 or 4 sessions in. Oh, this is based on a movie that happened a few years back, and Chris Patton was the lead, and they hired me, and I don't even know if the director knew that. And the director just kind of cast stuff the way that they saw fit, and I don't know that they knew about the source material or anything like that. So it's really unfortunate that there's not a little bit more due diligence done there, and things aren't covered. And it's hard for us as actors to advocate for each other in those situations because we're not informed enough. Now, getting to the point of Psyche K. Psyche K, for those who maybe aren't aware, there was a dub for an anime called Psyche K, or The Disastrous Life of Psyche K, I think is the full title. Anyway, the first season was dubbed at Funimation in Dallas, and Jerry Jewell played Psyche. Second season never got a dub. Funimation let the license lapse or something. I don't know. Somehow Netflix got a hold of the rights for season 3 of the show. And it went to a studio in Los Angeles. This was in November 2019, just mere weeks into, not even like less than a month into the lifespan of the Netflix dubbing agreement. So that had just come into effect. And we were pre-pandemic. And this LA studio had the rights to produce a third season of Psyche K. And they hired Chris Bevins to direct it. And he called me on the phone one night to say, hey, I'm working on this show. It was a thing at Funimation. It's going to be done here in LA now. He told me that he had already talked to Jerry and let him know that this was happening. And he was thinking of me for the lead. So I did get a heads up with that particular show. I don't know how many other cast members got a similar phone call, if any. I don't know if anybody else in the original cast got a call from Chris or not. I will say that when I had that conversation with him, I asked him about the possibility of casting anybody from the original cast. And he said, like, I would love to be able to keep everybody, but we can't do anything with anybody based that's not here in LA. And like that was like a firm, like, we cannot do that, whether that came from Netflix or the studio or just sign of the times, because things were different in November 2019. I don't know. But that was off the table. That was out of the cards, period, and full stop. I want to make it known that that is not something, that's not a decision SAG-AFTRA made at all. That was a decision that was made by either Netflix or the studio or maybe by Bevins. I don't think so. But yeah, not SAG-AFTRA's place to say you can't use the original cast. They absolutely would have allowed that to happen. They wouldn't step in the way of that. And there's some new stuff coming in the works that we've seen some announcements of shows that Netflix has picked up recently that have existing casts that are from Texas, and we're trying, like, the organizers like myself are trying to keep tabs on these things, and we're reaching out ahead of time to fellow actors to kind of spread the word. Hey, if you see auditions, maybe let the studio know that there's an existing cast that they could use. Because we don't, like, nobody likes to see when our peers get replaced for no good reason.
Yeah. No, I've actively seen and heard conversations about this. We're not going to obviously name any projects.
Yeah.
I'm sure that many of you have an idea of which ones we might be talking about, but
Right.
I've been hearing and seeing these conversations saying we want to make sure that if we see this, we inform everybody and we all try to find a respectful but strong boundary to remind that this already exists, with people who already exist that are just as available as we are.
Yeah.
You know? I saw a really good question actually in the
Twitch chat?
Twitch chat.
Sure. Yeah, I have not been looking at
So
that nearly enough
yeah, I
tonight.
was I'm trying to keep a little eye on it. I saw a question, about about the race to the bottom I was talking about previously um with production houses. Why don't more studios use remote work? If that's the case, there's less overhead for equipment and studio space, which means they need less profit and keep their bottom line steady. The answer to that is that, in fact, they do
Some
pretty much still.
studios, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, some
Oh,
studios have leveraged that.
yeah. There are
Uh,
some,
uh, and
but there
there
are many that still use their spaces and still
well,
use their equipment.
many of them own those
Hmm.
spaces and equipment and
Yeah.
invested heavily in them, and it feels like
Hmm.
they're throwing money away if they don't make use of it.
Yeah.
And there are legitimate challenges that are introduced when you're doing remote recording that aren't
Yep.
there when everybody's in the same space.
Hmm.
Uh, they're not insurmountable challenges, obviously, because we've
Right.
worked
Because
around them
we've
for the past 3 years or
right.
however long it's been.
Or however long it's been. But, there are challenges, and it also depends on which client you're talking about, which property you're talking about, um, because there will be some shows and things that, like, some of the newer, smaller budget anime that will absolutely be like, "Yeah, sure, just throw it to, somebody and we'll do more remote stuff." But say one of your bigger picture things, uh, that will require a little bit more finesse, they'll feel they may bring you into the studio or ask you to come into the studio. I know that there are shows and things that I work on here in LA. Some of them are totally fine with me just using my booth over here in the corner.
Yeah.
And others are like, hey, we'd really prefer you to come in. And I've also had situations where I have said I would prefer to come in on certain
Yeah.
things because I knew how perhaps vocally stressful or mentally stressful some of these productions or projects that I'd be working on would be for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lot more comforting not to have to handle my own gain
Right.
and not to have my, my mind on a few, all these other things, to be able to just focus on doing the work that's right in front of me.
A big one for me is to be able to have air conditioning on while I'm recording.
Yeah, that's also really
Yeah.
lovely. But the answer to that is some have, some absolutely have, some
Yes.
absolutely do. And then others, like we were just talking about, in Crunchyroll, Funimation, they just built, just
Yeah. Yeah.
redid
They
this
want to use.
huge, amazing
Yeah.
thing, right?
They want to make use of the investment that they've made, for sure.
Yeah, and that investment, I'm gonna guess, was probably made at the with the approval of shareholders and other and folks,
Right.
and it needs to
Yeah,
it needs
they
to
gotta
turn around a
show
profit.
that. Yeah, exactly.
That they made the right choice.
Right.
So there's things like that.
Another one that's this has come up and been answered in a couple other places, but I'll answer it here. People mentioning that Mob Psycho 100 has never been produced on a union contract. So how does a union member who doesn't work non-union end up on the show? When I started working on it, I wasn't a union member. First season was recorded in 2015. It was a lifetime ago. So that's
So
how.
that would be
That's
the
how.
answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's existed for so long.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a
Exactly.
long time.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, jeez. I remember you auditioning for that.
I know.
Wow. One person's asking, are SAG-AFTRA of LA and SAG-AFTRA of Texas separate institutions? I.e., if not enough actors join in Texas and pay dues, can Texas SAG not rely on resources from LA?
No, it's all one union. It's a national
Mhm,
union that has several different locals all throughout the
mhm,
country. The LA local is the largest and the strongest because we have a very big presence in this market. But
mhm,
there are local offices all over the country, and those offices now they don't get as many resources in markets where there's not a lot of work happening
mhm,
uh, until there's like an active organizing effort happening,
mhm,
like the one that we're trying to get going with Dallas, and have been trying to get going since before the Netflix contract came into being. We've had a lot of
right,
roadblocks there, but
right,
it's still actively
yeah,
trying to happen. That that doesn't mean that we've got all the resources in the world. We definitely don't. But
right,
uh, no, the fact that there's not a lot of work happening doesn't mean there's no resources. The office is definitely still there.
right. But yeah, you're right. It's fully national, and I think the presence will probably continue to grow a little bit, all over the country, just because uh, film and television live action filming is taking place more and more outside of just California. Like, Atlanta is a huge hub of that now. And so I'm imagining that there's definitely a place there for union members to, handle life and their business and all those other good things. Um, so yeah, there's no difference necessarily.
Yeah,
They're all one big
yeah,
monster.
yeah.
Um, Let me see. Do you see another question that you would like
We've
to
gotten through
hit?
all of the specific questions that were mentioned from survey
Mhm.
responses.
Yeah.
How are we doing on
Um,
our anonymous questions?
we've got a lot of anonymous questions. I'm kind of skimming a little bit here and there just because some of them
Some of them
feel
have been
and
addressed, and some of them
some
aren't
have been addressed.
necessarily relevant to this conversation, I'm
conversation.
sure.
While I
Yeah.
appreciate the participation and people asking questions, a lot of this we're really trying to pertain to people who are actively working right now.
Right.
So I appreciate your patience, guys. Um, like let's see. There was one that I saw that I wanted to address in here. And we already addressed this one. Actors' right to work state can't be forced to join the union, but can they qualify for health care? Yes, we covered that. The answer is yes. Um, unions. Do unions and agents for like a voiceover and commercial work together? The answer is yes. Agents can be, what is it? It's not certified.
Sorry,
They're
what was that? I'm looking at questions. I was not
do
paying attention.
unions and agents do unions and agencies voiceover slash commercial work together? There are it's not SAG certified, SAG
There's a
verified
license that,
license.
yeah,
There's a license.
agents have to be licensed with SAG-AFTRA to represent union members and
Yeah.
send them auditions and
Hmm.
for union jobs.
And I imagine that's also so that they
Or
are aware
franchised,
of,
I think might be the
yeah.
word.
Oh yeah, it's franchise.
Anyway,
Because the agents they have to be able to understand the ins and outs of the SAG AFTRA uh, contracts to make sure it's being handled correctly for you. So the answer is yes, they do. But to that note, just because an agent is SAG AFTRA affiliated or franchised does not necessarily mean that they do not accept non-union talent. It can be helpful to get there, but there are definitely agencies out there that
right.
work with what they'll call developmental talent, which is a non-union person, and help them like to build the tools and become successful in whatever direction that they'd like to move. But oftentimes, more often than not, especially if it's like an LA-based agent, they're assuming that at some point or another you would like to become union, and they're going to aim in that direction. Um, are there people who try to gatekeep anime and voiceover work? I think just like in any other
I don't think
subculture.
I don't think anybody actively is trying to gatekeep anything.
I mean,
I think
I would like to say that.
uh,
I think that there's probably some folks in like the old guard. I feel like everybody kind of gets set into a certain situation where they'll see something new or something changing and it will become uncomfortable. I don't think they'll try to necessarily gatekeep block anybody,
no,
but
honestly, I think a lot of studios try to hire new voices just to keep things fresh a lot
mhm,
of the time. But there is like I think the reason that you hear a lot of the same people in a lot of projects is because of the fact that studios get to where they're like, we're on a deadline, we got to get this
yeah,
thing done, we need to know that whoever we hire can do it. And
yeah,
and there's a learning curve. Like with
mhm.
dubbing is not like just knowing how to act. There's a whole technical side of it
There's
that you got to be able to do too.
I'd like to hope I've improved over the years,
And
but
yeah, you do learn it. You
you know,
you learn and you get better as you do it, but you got to be given the chance and yeah,
I
so I
think
think that's why there's the perception that there's gatekeeping happening.
a not so indirect contributor to that is again what I was talking about before, which is that we'll call it that race to the bottom. It's that they've got so much
Mhm.
time and they've only got
Yeah.
so much money.
Yeah.
So even it's very possible that they'll hear an audition from somebody who is brand spanking new, they sound amazing, they have the character, but they don't have a resume, or they're pretty close and it sounds like they could definitely bring something to the table that would be new, fresh, interesting, and different, especially working with a director. Um, but the fear is taking the chance, and uh, they don't have the
Yeah,
time
they don't have the
to, number
luxury
one,
of yeah,
nurse that performance to make sure that
right.
this new person is comfortable or see how quickly they can move.
Right.
Or if they unfortunately hire someone who's brand new and they feel that they're not necessarily moving in the direction that they'd like them to, they don't have the resources to unfortunately let that
Replace them,
person
yeah.
go
Yeah.
and then start again with someone new.
Right.
So a lot of times when they don't have a lot of cash
Mhm.
to kind of throw around, they will go with their safer bets.
Yeah.
They will go with their usual takes. because they know what they can get from that person will be at least acceptable. And I think if there was a little bit more room in the budgets, a little bit more room in the schedules, we would probably end up seeing an even more diverse talent pool showing up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is a sincere feeling, and it is something that I would like to see. I see another question at the bottom where somebody's asked, was what was it? It was what it was like, are you concerned? Oh, does the VO industry becoming more competitive concern you, meaning you may book less? That's just the reality of the game.
Yeah. No.
Being an actor in general, being an artist, being freelance in general, whether or not you're an actor, this is a competitive world that we're living in, and it's a good thing in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think especially in the wake of the last several years where we were talking about like the BLM movement, where we're seeing more and more people being cast from the LGBTQ plus community in a very vocal and out sort of way, seeing more representation of the non-binary group of folks being cast in both non-binary and binary roles, and hearing more and more about this is incredibly valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to see more of that. Not to mention just specifically new actors. It's a good thing. And I think a lot of us, especially in the beginning of our journeys or whatever, at the beginning of our lives and careers, we have this idea that the work is finite.
Yeah, and I feel like, I mean, there's more and more work to be had every
Every
year.
year. Every
Yeah.
year there are more and more shows being produced, maybe or maybe not in necessarily dubbing, but just in general, there's so much out there, and there will continue to be, especially just because anime is profitable. It makes a lot of money.
Yeah, which wasn't always the case, but it's definitely making a lot of money now.
It's making more and more money every year.
Yeah.
It's becoming more and more popular every year with the regular folks, not just nerds and geeks anymore, not just like the kids off in the on in high school who have like 5 or 6 friends. It's grown into this thing that's become more communally accepted.
Right.
We're much less of the outcast and much more of pushed into the forefront. The fact that we've had so many anime movies become blockbusters just in the last couple of years is mind-boggling.
Yeah.
That's
Definitely
beaten
a
out
sign
so
of
many of those
right.
mainstream cinema stuff.
Right. Uh
And yeah.
Sorry, I wanted to address something else because I got a text message like an hour ago and completely
Oh.
missed it, but
Uh-oh.
I missed something on the vocal stress protections that we have in the new Netflix contract. Not only
Yeah.
is it a 2-hour limit, but it's also a 125% session fee. So you get
Oh,
paid a
right.
little bit more on that
For those
for those
more
vocally stressful sessions as well.
so there is that.
Yeah.
That is an excellent thing to know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
Completely forgot
it's
about that improvement.
so all of
Sorry.
these people, all of these executives out there, or these investors out there are seeing that the return on investment, specifically like for anime and stuff, is huge. It's insane, and especially because we produce it on such a tiny, tiny budget most of the time,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So there is not a reality at this point that I'm seeing moving forward where there won't just continue to be more dubbing.
Yeah, no, it's the industry's going to keep on growing at least for a while.
Yeah.
And
And
yeah, and
so
like you said, even like
mhm,
when the dubbing industry reaches its critical mass or whatever, there's still going to be more work in other mediums. Like there's
mhm.
always more work.
Video
So,
games are growing and growing and growing, and Western style animation is growing and growing and growing.
yeah.
It's, well, I mean, uh, we won't even get into stuff that's been going on with like HBO
Oh,
and stuff
yeah.
like that.
Uh
But in general,
but yeah, well, and yeah, so that basically like while voiceover is more competitive than it's ever been, and there's like because there's more and more people who want to do it,
Mm-hmm.
There's also more jobs than there have ever been
Yeah.
available. So
So
yeah,
and I mean, just the name of the game, the reality of the situation is no one is guaranteed to work, and no one is guaranteed, and even if you do work, there's nobody's guaranteed to suddenly shoot off like a
right.
rocket, become successful or famous or what have you. That's just the name of being
Yeah.
an artist and a freelance worker. It is a risk that we're all taking. And just because someone is working today does not necessarily mean that in 2 years they will continue to work. Um, but it's something that we all deal with. And
Hmm.
it would be incredibly entitled of me to believe that I should keep other people out of this industry specifically for my own sake when
Yeah,
I was
that's
when I
really
had the privilege of entering in the first place.
yeah. That's that kind of mindset. I don't. Maybe I'm naive. Maybe I'm way too glass half full in this context, but I don't
Mhm.
feel like that's a very common mindset within our industry. Where
Perhaps not.
because
Yeah.
I think because nobody breaks into this industry without some help from somebody
Mhm.
somewhere, and I feel like
Yeah.
most of us at worst are indifferent about newcomers, and
Yeah.
at best want to kind of pay it forward a little bit.
Mhm.
So I don't know.
So
That's my
y
thinking on that.
I mean, that is the hope, that is the desire. I had a thought and it left my brain.
Sorry.
It's okay. Um, what was I gonna say? It doesn't probably doesn't fully matter. But I was gonna say, also because like we were saying, I kind of towards the beginning, anime is not necessarily a sustainable space to live in. Anime, if you're thinking that anime is going to pay your bills and help you live and grow in the way that you'd like to in a sustaining and flourishing way, very likely not so much, especially as with the climate as it is right now. For most people, most of us have to diversify somehow. Be it like that other there was a question before about the conventions, be it teaching, writing, directing, any other avenue of just work in general. Lots of us wear lots of different hats at any
Hmm.
one given time,
A lot of the
and
people who filled
most of
out
it.
this survey are in
Mhm.
fact, that applies
Yeah.
to as well. So yeah.
And a large portion of voice actors in general or dubbing actors in general don't remain dubbing actors for their entire careers. A lot of us will move on into um, more interactive stuff. They'll move on into more commercial stuff and Western animation,
Hmm.
or they'll start directing primarily, or they'll become producers. Like this is still a journey. Usually anime is not the end game. It is for some folks perhaps, but not everybody and not most of us. So while that's always growing and changing and people are growing and changing and entering the landscape and leaving it at the same time, there's a continuous flow.
Yeah.
So there's gonna be new folks, there's gonna be new faces, there's gonna be new voices. It's just reality,
Yeah.
you know? And thinking that we need to keep anybody out or stop a whole region from working
Yeah.
to save our
I
own
don't.
hides is completely counterintuitive and counterproductive.
Yeah,
There's an
I
Yeah.
agree with that sentiment, Edwin Tiong in the chat there. Blockers and gatekeepers out themselves sooner or later and get left by the sidelines because of their toxic attitude. Yeah, I think that kind of tends to. Yeah, I think the cream tends to rise to the top a little bit. The people
Mhm.
who last in the industry tend to be pretty good people for the most part,
Yeah.
in my
Now what
experience.
I would say that I would love to see a change in within the industry rather than worrying about necessarily the gatekeepers because like you said, I agree, they sort of just it's hard to hide for too long.
Yeah.
Um, it would be really exciting if I could see within our little subculture here a little bit more advocacy
Mm-hmm.
rather than, because a lot of us, and I understand the reasoning behind it and the need for it, is some of us, and myself included, sometimes feel that we must keep our heads down and keep out of trouble, especially in the light of social media being such a huge part of our lives at this point.
Yeah.
It's easy to feel like if I say anything, I'm going to get canceled. And that's absolutely true, especially for our marginalized groups. It's absolutely true for the folks in the LGBTQ plus community. It's absolutely true in with those of us who are people of color, and
Yeah.
there's such a need and feeling of to be
Right.
protective of what we're doing, what we're saying, our points of views, and what have you, so that we can just at least stay at the table.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit, which is part of why we're here at the today,
Right.
is there has to be some point where some of us see that something is wrong, and when we feel like we have the ability and to move forward and at least bring it to light, come to the table, say something, do something to at least get the conversation rolling, like Kyle was trying to do this entire time. I'd like to see more of that.
That's the hope. Yeah.
Whether or not we're talking about the union. I'm not just talking about the union
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
You know, like we were talking about before with people being possibly recast and replaced and things like that. That happens in union and non-union, and sometimes that's just going to happen for one reason or another. It is absolutely the prerogative of the production
Right.
to make that choice. But sometimes those things, it's so much better to be able to have that knowledge beforehand, so the actor walking in can make an informed decision.
Yeah.
I have had multiple situations where I have walked into a job not realizing until most of the way through the production, and there was one occasion where that happened to me, and it resulted in me being dogpiled and getting death threats. And I would have liked to have known
Yeah.
beforehand
Yeah.
that this was a possibility. I would have liked to have known what I was walking into
Right.
before I said, yes to this position. And I was very grateful that it was happening to me, because I was already in the middle of my career and feeling okay and kind of buoyed by my community. Whereas somebody who might have just gotten that job and had never had a job in their life on some sort of voiceover work, they might have gotten completely traumatized, terrified, and left. And that's not okay to me.
Yeah.
So I would love to see a little bit more advocacy for ourselves and each other. I'd like for the playing field to feel like a place where you can safely say something and not feel like you have to just kind of kowtow to the situation as it is, as it stands.
Right.
And hopefully we'll be able to start a better communication, not just within LA and just within Texas and just within New York or whatever, but at least, if
At
not
least
further,
nationally, but
national
hopefully
conversation,
globally. Yeah.
hopefully
Exactly.
global conversation,
Right.
because more than ever before, we are able to work
Yeah.
with
Our
people,
worlds are colliding more and more and more, for
you know,
sure. Yeah.
and it would only behoove us to, number one, have a more transparency and be on each other's side.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
just how I feel. So hopefully, over the course of this conversation, you've been able to receive some sort of information that helps you make one decision or another, or at least sends you in a direction to seek out more information, or maybe somebody who might have seen this or will see this later on might be interested, especially from Texas, in having a further conversation to bring to light things that we just can't see from where we're sitting. So that we can move in a more productive direction, and there's less contention here at this level,
Yeah.
because all that fighting is going to do for actors against actors is make sure that the the people who are signing the checks don't have to deal with it. Sorry, I get a little passionate.
No, you're fine. I've been trying to scroll through these, like listening to you so that I can chime in, but also trying to read through any of these questions and see if we're missing anything that we really need to address. Uh, maybe this is straying a little bit from the subject of tonight's conversation, but it's still pertinent and relevant. How does the
Okay.
union work with international people in, let's say, Canada? Do they work with ACTRA, or would they need to sign with both ACTRA and SAG-AFTRA? Uh, the short answer to that question is I don't know. I know that it is feasible for SAG-AFTRA productions to hire actors who are working internationally, because I know that, I've talked to a producer who has done that, who's hired actors in
Mm-hmm.
London and in Vancouver, and like on
Yeah.
productions that are recording in LA or New York.
Yeah.
So I know it's possible. I just don't know what exactly all of the extra rules are
Yeah.
that are in place there.
I think, yeah, I kind of wish like it's having like Steph Shea or something, because I feel like
Yeah,
she
she
would
would
be really
definitely be
knowledgeable
able to answer that
to
question
answer
better
that
than me.
question. So we can put a pin in that. We can just very short answer say it is absolutely possible. I've seen it absolutely happen. I've had it happen on productions I was working on. I just was not handling the paperwork.
Yeah, I don't know
I
how.
don't think it costs
I
more.
no, I think it's
I
all it
think.
all has to do with whatever the labor laws are in that country,
Hmm.
I think.
I have
And
seen. I mean.
SAG-AFTRA does have sister union agreements with, like,
Hmm.
ACTRA in Canada, and
Hmm.
whoever the union is in London. So
Yeah.
there's
Just last year, I think
some.
there was a dub that happened out of LA where the lead in the dub production, they kept the original Seiyu, and I think
Yeah,
it was a union production, and, like, so they're working all over the planet,
yeah,
and,
yeah, yeah.
it is absolutely feasible to
Yeah.
do.
As far as the union rules go, all that
Mhm.
SAG-AFTRA really cares about is that whoever you're hiring is being,
Yeah,
that you're honoring the
yeah,
contract for
yeah,
everyone,
mhm.
and that you
I
are
also know you don't have to be a citizen to work on SAG-AFTRA contracts when you're here in the
no,
States. You do not have to do that.
but employment laws may necessitate, well, not necessarily
Some
necessitate
sort
you to
of
be a citizen, but you got to
but
be
have a
eligible to
visa,
work in the,
right.
yeah,
You
exactly.
would need to have a visa to do so, but you
Right.
don't necessarily have to be a US citizen. Um, and I don't know the ins and outs of that either, but I do know that it is absolutely possible
Yeah.
to work on a SAG contract while not from the United States.
Yes.
Um, oh, I see.
Check.
Devin has ACTRA is a sister union. Anyone in ACTRA is SAG eligible. So that's cool to know. Thanks, Devin.
Oh, yeah. So just like Actors Equity, the
Mhm.
stage union.
Yeah,
Um,
excellent.
mm, 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 looking through, see if there's anything else here that we really need to.
George Peters says they sent you a whisper on a good person to ask about international processes. They recently got Taft-Hartley from a Netflix gig, so they
Oh,
may have a good
well, there you
idea.
go. So they maybe
Um,
they know. Yeah, I mean, I would say that if you are an internationally based actor who's looking to break in to voiceover, particularly
mhm,
the voiceover industry here in the U.S., uh, you want to learn up on those labor laws,
yeah,
so that
and
when you're submitting yourself for those jobs, you can educate your potential employers on how they can hire you,
I
because
think
they may not know.
yeah, and I think while this is a difficult hurdle, I think it would behoove those who are internationals who would like to break into this industry here. Um, it would be it would be great for you if you have some sort of representation like an agent. Edwin was saying at least, if you do need some kind of visa, and yes, those can be very hard to get. I had a friend several years ago
Yeah,
who was not working in.
if you are
Mhm,
physically
if
in the
you're here,
United
if
States,
you're
because
physically
yes,
here.
if the work is happening, like you're from your home studio elsewhere,
Hmm.
then
Yeah,
technically the work is happening not in the United States.
yeah. So
There's,
it's not something they
but
have to really
I
necessarily.
don't know what all of the
Yeah.
hoops they got to jump through there
Hmm.
then
But I
are.
do know that there have been some agents and managers that have been able. I don't know about the VO industry, but the industry, and especially SAG-AFTRA, in the industry as a whole, of actors and such things, um, they have been able to sponsor talent. and help them get their
Yeah,
visas.
yeah.
And they're usually, though, I think at that time it was an entertainment visa, so they had to work within the entertainment industry, which might have been a little difficult, but um for them at the time. But that it is an avenue that is open. And I just hope that anybody who might be watching who is a person from, outside of the United States, or
Right.
who is here but is not a citizen, understands that I don't want anybody left behind. We're not looking for anybody to be necessarily left behind.
Right.
Um, cool. So we've been
Uh,
at this for 2.5 hours, just so
yeah.
you know.
Yeah, and I do
Um,
need to go feed my animals relatively soon.
uh-huh,
And I feel like we have addressed
quite a bit.
we've addressed pretty much everything that I think we needed to
Mhm.
tonight. I hope that this
Yeah.
was digestible for people. I hope that there's
The desire, yeah.
yeah, I
I
hope I
hope that
can
there were snippets that were helpful. Kyle, you said you were gonna post the VOD, and our hope was to,
I
if we
would
can find some good
I'd like
snippets,
to cut it down
edit
into
it.
digestible bits. I don't know when I'm going to have time to do that, but I want to do that if I can. Like maybe like individual topics of conversation. Let's, cut it
Yeah,
into that
something.
and one little like bite-sized bits so that maybe hopefully more of those Texas voice actors can get
Mhm.
some of that information. I
And
hope we covered I don't know.
I hope so, and I also hope that the conversation continues. We're just 2 actors here, so
Yeah,
it's very
two LA
possible.
actors,
2
no
LA
less.
actors, so
So
we don't know everything again about what's going on in Texas, and there's very likely some things that we might have, because we're humans, we might have missed some things, we might have misquoted some things. To the best of our ability, we answered as many questions as we could from where we're sitting. If anyone else who's watching out there has something to add to the conversation, please reach out to Kyle
yeah,
or to CODA.
hopefully you know where to
Um,
find me. If you don't, I mean, I'm on Twitter at Kyle
yeah,
McCarley.
yeah.
You can email me. That's places. You can
So
find that
so
on my
he's
website.
very, very reachable, and I do again wanna, CODA, I think, is also a really good place to, because you've got a whole
Please
bunch of heads.
contact CODA.
Yeah,
CODAunite.com.
yeah. They don't buy, I mean, speaking as a person who's not necessarily a member, I'm not part of CODA, but I do know that I know many people who are on that board, and I know
And we are
that they mean very well,
we're actively working on making that a more national effort than something that feels very LA centric. We've already got
which,
a very
yeah.
strong there's a very strong presence for CODA in New York.
There was one in
There
Texas,
was
and I
one
know
in
that.
Texas. There's still a little bit and we're actively working on rebuilding that as well. So,
Mhm,
yeah.
and, if you're in Texas and if you're interested in being a little bit more active about it.
Please reach if you are a Texas-based voice actor who's
Mhm.
interested in assisting with organizing efforts, not necessarily in flipping things union, but just for improving things for your community.
To make sure that you're, yeah, if you're so inclined,
Please
that would, yeah.
reach out to CODA.
Mhm.
CODAunite.com.
Mhm.
There's a contact form there. So,
Yeah,
please.
and if anybody else is feeling inclined to continue the conversation, I would love to encourage you to do so. I am not a proxy for Texas,
Yeah.
by any
Yeah.
stretch of the
Yeah, if
imagination.
anybody wants to come on and like I can have another one of these talks with somebody
Mhm.
who like is on the ground there and knows things a little
Or
bit more
perhaps if you can
intimately.
find a slightly more intimate setting to have this conversation,
Yeah.
say like a scheduled Zoom meeting or something, just so that we feel a little bit more protected for everybody. This was the best effort we could make in a short notice to make sure that everybody felt protected and safe, because that is top priority, is to make sure everybody knows that,
Right.
you
That was
know,
why we did
they're,
things the way that we did tonight.
yeah,
So, uh
and that's the only reason.
yeah. But
So
thank you
thank you
all so
everybody for
much
bearing with
for
us.
yeah, thank you for sitting through this talk. I hope it was helpful for some of you guys. Thank you
Yeah,
to those of you who filled out the survey. Really
I
appreciate
did,
it.
yeah.
Uh, and uh, and I hope that you are all well.
Yeah. Thanks for dealing with this, because it was literally just born out of my brain. I was just too mad. So my bad. But yeah, I hope at the very least it just got some juices flowing for someone.
Yeah.
So
So
thanks,
thanks
guys.
everybody. And just real quickly, I want to address the fans that are in the audience and people like regular Twitch viewers of mine who tuned in tonight. Sorry tonight was a little different. You got a little peek behind the curtain, kind of. Sorry I didn't acknowledge your bits and your subscribes and all of that stuff. I'll get back to a real Twitch broadcast schedule on this channel someday.
Yeah.
Hopefully in another few weeks.
And it was good to see you guys.
It sure was. Laura, thank you for doing this.
Sure, man.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for helping me facilitate. Please thank everybody who helped put together the survey for me.
Yeah,
too.
I will.
Because everybody there were multiple hands on this ship.
There was some input on putting together the survey, and there was a lot of assistance in going through results from one person in particular. So thank you to those folks. All right. Thank you all so very much for sitting through this, and we'll talk to you later. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.